You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, politics is our game, and we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because, well, we were away from the world of dance. If you watched one of our last shows with the Foster Dance Studio, really interesting stuff. It's a metaphor for life, but no more. We're back to politics. This is what we do, okay? And we've got State Representative
Skillicorn from the Crystal Lake and Dundee area.
And you are a Republican, as I recall.
I'm a Republican.
You are a staunch conservative.
Yes, I'm socially and fiscally conservative.
And who are you supporting in the Republican primary for governor?
I'm supporting Jeannie Ives wholeheartedly.
Aren't you afraid that Rauner may take $20 million and come after just you? He may just come after you, and he can obliterate you. You understand that?
Jesse Jackson Jr. once said, "Bring it on." I'm not going to say that. But the reality is Rauner has defined himself. No amount of money changes that.
You're not afraid of him.
I'm willing to take on Governor Rauner because it's the right thing to do.
You think Jeannie Ives has a chance of winning this?
It's tough, but does Bruce Rauner have a chance of winning this?
Well, he's got 20 million, he's got 50 million, he's got 100 million if he wants. I mean, he's got about $1 billion in net worth. He's not going to spend more than 100 million, but he could spend that on the general and the primary. He could spend 20 million and blow her away. Jeannie wanted to have 2 million. It's now looking like it's tough for her to get $1 million. If she's got $1 million, he spends 20, it's 20 to 1. You know, he can create the image. He's a nice guy. Mike Madigan stopped all his reforms. What can you do against Mike Madigan? Give him another chance. That's another question. What will he do with giving him another chance? But it's not his fault. He's taken on Mike. Mike stopped the reforms. What's wrong with that, Ernie?
I would add that he said he wasn't in charge. And that's really the big problem here. So he can define himself all he wants with these fancy commercials. He can use all the governors around the states and say that he's this great guy. Fancy commercials don't make policy differences that change Illinois lives. This is a last-ditch effort to save Illinois. And that's why we need someone different. That's why we need someone like Jeannie, who is a policy leader, not someone that caves Mike Madigan. I mean, look at the income tax hike, right? It's 4.95%. Why is it exactly that?
We're taping this show on January 12th, 2018. When was that income tax hike you're talking about?
Just after the 4th of July.
Okay, and it went from what to what?
It went down from 3 up to almost what it was back before in 2016.
Almost 5%, but not quite 4.95, so that everybody can say, we did go back to the same.
And that's why I asked that question. It's 4.95% because Governor Rauner wanted it to be 4.9%. Well, so that's the number that he got.
But he said he opposed it. He said he would trade some increase, he never really quite said what, increase in revenue for reforms. You wouldn't argue with that. To get some reforms, and you know it's important to get reforms, you have to give a little. So there's nothing wrong with the statement he made prior to this. They'll give some increase in revenue in exchange for reform. Or is there? Would you have said no increase in revenue?
If you look at the Senate negotiations, he's the one that set the ground floor on this. And that's what Democrats ran with and won with. He vetoed it the same day it was passed. You know why? So we were still in Springfield, and he knew the veto would be overridden. If he would have waited, he could have legally, constitutionally waited 30 days and brought us back 30 days later to try to override that veto. He did not. He knew that we were going to override it 24 hours later.
I mean, you think he had a shot at changing Republicans' minds who were supporting the override of the veto. He knew he had a shot, but he didn't take the 30 days to take that shot.
I'm glad you asked that question. So he didn't even try to change minds. He didn't reach out to the Republican legislators. I sat with someone who supported a tax hike on my right and my left.
Well, how do you? He might have tried. He might have tried before and said, "There's no sense in wasting 30 days. I can't change their minds." He might have said that. I don't know.
He didn't reach out to anyone to change minds.
You know that.
Votes.
You know that for a fact.
I'm confident in that. There are legislators that called his staffers and said, "Give me a reason not to vote for this, or I will." And he never called them back.
Okay. And Jeannie Ives, if she were there, she would have done that, is what you're saying. She would have tried really hard to change minds.
And even if she failed, she would have tried. And she would have used that soapbox that the governor has as a bullet pulpit to say that this is wrong, there's no reforms. Do you really think she would have let 44 reforms go?
See, Well, and really tell people what the 5 big reforms are, because this is really key. You may not know, because Rauner never really said, here are the 5 biggies. He just said, give me something. Please, please, Mike, I'm groveling, I'm begging. He basically said this, folks. I was at this press conference. Look, I like Bruce. He's a good guy, and we hope one day he'll do a show here. He's done it with everybody. That's fine, because we used to complain. No more. My resolution for the new year, here's the Berkowitz resolution: charity toward all, malice toward none. You go with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
So,
I was
Bruce, we hope you'll
supportive.
come on. So, but I mean, the point is, you said he went from 44 reforms to 5, actually to 0, some said. Did he ever really say, here are the 5 key reforms that I want? Do you think he ever said that?
If he would have communicated that, he could have won something.
Now, what 5 reforms do you think he was saying? Was the Illinois Policy Institute saying? What were the 5 key reforms?
Well,
It's a game show.
He did put his name on
Alan
all
Skillicorn is playing the game show.
Workers' compensation reform.
That's one. Okay, one.
We needed to have some sort of lawsuit reform to lower costs. We need to have collective bargaining reform.
That is key.
for the
Explain
city
that.
and also local municipalities.
Explain that let's take a minute on that. That is so important. Glad you mentioned that. So you mentioned workers' comp. That's really important. We'll go back to that. Why is workers' comp?
Workers' compensation is great for private sector employers because we are not competitive to our neighbors.
Where are we, if you rank the 50 states, where is Illinois roughly?
It is moving around, but it's going
Roughly, where is it?
5th or 6th in the nation out of 50 states.
Well, 56 from the bottom.
50 states.
Fifth from the bottom.
5th from the bottom.
So we're lacing,
So we're
if you
from
rank
the
one as
fifth
best, if you rank one as best, we're like 45.
Right. And
Okay.
if you compare like us to something like Texas, it's a 50% reduction there.
So
That's significant.
employer, he's going to Texas, she's going to Texas, she ain't coming to Illinois because we have these high workers' comp costs. Is that right?
And let's take Texas out of it. Let's compare ourselves to our neighbors. Indiana, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa. We are not competitive.
They're
with
like
them.
22, 17, 14. They're so much better.
10 years ago, we were middle of the pack.
Okay, so workers' comp reform. And Bruce just never, ever said what you and I have just said. Bruce, you should hire. He should get somebody to replace you.
Can you
He
afford
should-
me?
I don't know. I mean, your opportunity cost is so high. Mine too. But if you could afford Alan, you should hire him, right? Okay, he's going to make you an offer you can't refuse. As soon as you finish the show, as soon as he sees this, you're going to be a rich man. Would you go to work to Bruce if he said he'll do all these things you want him to do?
I would go to work for the Illinois people, which are in.
You already did. Okay, so enough kidding around. Workers' comp. Number 2, you started with number 2 was collective bargaining. Let's go to the local units first. Why do you have to have reform of collective bargaining on the local level? Why is that important to the Illinois budget, to the Illinois economy, etc.?
Well, it's a diverse state. There's a big difference between the working conditions here in Chicago, economic conditions here in Chicago versus Southern Illinois. You have situations in Southern Illinois where good jobs just are not available, and you have to open those doors. But some of it is the municipal level.
Just
Prevailing
explain
wage.
what you mean. So if you have teachers negotiating right now, as the teachers' unions do, from, where do you live? You live in Dundee?
I live in Northwest Suburbs. Yes.
Okay, you're the guy from Dundee, West Dundee, right?
Easton.
What are some of the suburbs you represent?
Elgin, Lake in the Hills, Crystal Lake, Algonquin, Huntley.
So if the
Dundee.
folks are in Elgin, and they're notorious for bad education contracts, right? Isn't that true?
There's some difficulties there.
Okay, so when they negotiate a contract, they negotiate collective bargaining, they negotiate salaries. All of these village governments around the state of Illinois do it. All local governments, Rockford, Aurora, the smaller governments, Winnetka, Wilmette, and so forth. They just enter into this stuff. They start negotiating high salaries for teachers, high salaries for the other local employees, okay? And then they get it back in high property taxes, right? That's the way it
That
works.
is a big driver. It's more complex than
So
that.
you
but it's a big
can't just
driver.
freeze property taxes, let alone decrease property taxes, unless you can control those local government costs. Is that right?
Passing along savings comes from allowing them to run leaner. Now, you could freeze property taxes. It's a strategy called
A
starve the beast.
That would be a start, but you merely want to push property taxes down.
Ideally, what you want to do is to get rid of these unfunded mandates. Not all of them are collective bargaining, but there's other things like how they build buildings.
Let's
and
keep it
such.
on collective bargaining for a second.
But
Just explain to
if
me-
local district can afford these collective bargaining contracts, then they should go ahead and do that.
What would you
They should
like-
earn that money.
Yeah, but what would you like to restrict if you could? Could you somehow say to the teachers' unions, we're not negotiating healthcare, we're not negotiating salaries, here's our schedule, take it or leave it? Could you do that? And could you have reforms that made it easier for local governments to do that?
I think that there isn't a political will in Illinois or those local units of government to do that.
But if there
But
were,
why do you say restrict? You should be giving the freedom to those boards
maybe I get it wrong,
to
but
make the decisions
Have you
that
ever
best benefit their
have you read the
communities.
budget reforms 2018 of the Illinois Policy Institute?
Yeah.
Okay, it sounds to me that's what they were suggesting. They said you need to curtail the scope of collective bargaining with local unions. I think I just outlined what they were saying. Do you think I'm?
I don't know if I want to say it's, so right now Illinois
I'm not
has an
saying,
iron
they said this,
fist.
they said this.
Illinois has an iron fist over what can be bargained right now. If you open that up and let the school boards decide what they're going to bargain on, what they're not going to bargain on, they can drive the best
Okay, you say you
value
allow
for
them
both
to
sides.
curtail the scope, those local governments.
Sure.
Right now, they can't.
Correct.
That's
Their hands
the
are
plan.
tied by.
So you, in this Illinois legislature, and your colleagues, Republican and Democrat, have to give these local governments the power to curtail the scope of collective bargaining. Is that
And
right?
right now, I'm working on a bill to do that.
Okay, so we got collective bargaining reform, possibly. We got workers' comp reform. What's the other biggie that Alan should have
Well,
been discussing?
let's dive into workers' compensation reform.
No, we don't have time.
Well,
We've
it's a
covered,
issue.
we've covered. Okay, go on. We've covered workers' comp, we've covered collective bargaining, curtailment, and scope. What's the other one which we haven't mentioned?
There's significant austerity measures in.
No, the big one, the big one.
Medicaid's the
Okay,
big one.
Medicaid's a big one.
And you know, we have people that aren't even eligible to receive Medicaid that are
Right.
receiving.
It's a $15 billion program. A lot of that comes from the feds, but a lot, 8 to 10, comes from the state
Well,
government.
you're driving for something, but what are you
Yeah,
driving for?
well, what are the main drivers of the budget? Education, right? Medicaid, right?
Those are two, and pensions.
Yes, you haven't mentioned pension reform. See, people say I talk too much. What do I have to do? I'm begging you to talk. Talk out.
We need to end the current pensions, and we have to transition to a defined contribution system, a 401k style system, and we need to do it immediately.
And when you say, go ahead, sorry.
Even though we raise taxes, is our debt going up or down? You know, we should bring up the comptroller's website right now. The debt is not going down, it's increasing.
Stay on standpoint. Pensions.
Yeah, well,
Talk
that's a
about
big driver of
pension
debt.
and explain what you mean about 401k style, and who could you do that for? Could you go to the current employees who've been there 15 years and say, I want to change your pension?
We have to protect what was already laid out in the past, 'cause we have contract, and, you know, there's decades and centuries of contract law, we can't
So
change
who
that.
can you change for sure?
Every day working forward, new employees.
New employees.
Current employees going forward.
Rauner could have come out for that 3 years ago. He could have said, he could have taken out a big act, he could have spent $5 million. Here's what I want in pension reform. Every new employee, January 1 or January 19th, 2015, when he came in, 3 years ago, okay? Because every new employee, I want that person to be on a 401k, no more defined benefit. Did he do that?
No, he didn't. And I'm going to steal a line from the current governor of Rhode Island. So when she was campaigning, she used the term, it's math, not politics, when she talked about pension reform. That's what we need to do. We need to communicate that. The math does not work with the amount of employees we have to continue this defined benefit system.
If he had done that, we would be well on our way to having significantly better situation in terms of high pension costs, right?
If we can get it done, but at least we drive the
Is
conversation.
that what the race is about? Those three reforms, not agreeing to a tax increase, unless you get those three reforms, for sure. Whether you should give a tax increase or not, another day, but that is essentially the nub of the issue between Jeannie Ives and Bruce Rauner. Am I right?
It's the issue to save Illinois.
Okay.
But so Bruce Rauner likes these reforms, but he's afraid of them. Okay? Jeannie Ives is not afraid to take on, and look at the matchup. You want to talk about the governor's race a little bit, I assume.
Only a
But
minute.
there's
We're
a
halfway
matchup.
through the show, we have to be fair and give the Democrats some time.
Okay, let's say the matchup between Ronner and Pritzker Kennedy bids, right?
Let's take Pritzker. Pritzker will go over to the Democratic primary. J.B. Pritzker, as you've seen in the ads, is running probably already $17 million in ads. Already 17 million. So when you think about the Democrats as being the party of the people and the party of the poor, I mean, look, we love JB and we hope you'd have on the show, but you can't say a party that's led by somebody who spent $17 million with 2 months left in the primary on ads is really the party of the poor, can you?
Absolutely not. And
Okay, that's JB Pritzker.
seeing Jamie Pritzker on TV is the best reason to cut the cord I've ever seen.
Oh, these are
And I'm
great
sure your
ads.
listeners-
No, these are great ads.
Your
I love these
viewers
ads.
might watch
They're
cable
great
still,
ads.
but they can
You
watch
gotta
it
give them
online,
credit.
right?
You gotta give them credit.
Cut the cord.
JB is doing nice ads, but you have to give credit where credit's due. JB, let's come on and talk about substance, because what he says, he's gonna do what Browner hasn't. He's gonna make the economy better, he's gonna not run down the state of Illinois, he's gonna go out to the people of Texas, say, come here, we're much better, he's gonna bring you jobs, he's gonna have an expanded healthcare system from the state of Illinois for everybody. He's gonna have, free college tuition, well, maybe that's Biss and Kennedy, but probably Pritzker too. It's just wonderful. It's morning in America. That's what Reagan was in 1980. Morning in Illinois in January 2018, in March 2018. Isn't that a great idea? He's copying Ronald Reagan. Morning in Illinois, right?
Might have to add a year to warning.
Right.
Because who's going to pay
That's
for
good,
that?
okay.
So right now I'm doing a study
Okay, that's your good.
of incomes in Illinois.
Okay.
And they talk about progressive income tax and such. The average income in Illinois is too low for that. It's going to be a massive tax hike on the middle and lower class, and they're not saying that.
Wait a second, what's going to be a mess?
So they talk about this progressive income, right?
Yeah, tax
you got to
for
pay for
rich.
it. You got to pay for all
Now,
this
when
stuff.
you were rich, do you make $200,000 a year?
No, I don't.
Do you make
There's
$100,000 a
only
year?
a-
How much do you make?
There's
How much
only-
do you make?
Right now, about 70.
Well, you mean you
So I'm in
don't have
between
a
gigs.
job? You don't have a job?
I'm in between gigs.
No, but you had a job for a while. It's
Yeah.
not what you make as a state rep.
Yeah, well, remember, I wasn't getting paid for quite a while. And you know what, that's fine.
When you
we're
had
doing
your
it.
private job and you were a state rep, how much were you making total?
There wasn't a lot of,
Nothing?
well,
Like
never, we
100,000?
weren't getting paid for quite a while, so there was a
No,
overlap there.
you got it. Just tell me, you shouldn't be afraid to tell me, when you had your private job and you were a state rep, how much were you making? Let's not talk about what the checks are. 100,000 total?
Yeah, it was probably about.
Was your wife working?
Yes.
Beautiful,
She-
right?
Yes,
Okay.
and she's,
She's worth 50,000 at least.
she's worth more than I am.
Okay, so that's 150,000. You're rich. Don't you want to pay your fair share?
Here's the issue.
Don't you want to pay
If
your
you
fair
look
share?
at incomes by zip code, there's only a half dozen zip codes that make that kind of money.
Really? 150,000 is
It's
not,
very,
there aren't
very
many?
low.
So, okay,
This-
so what if they
so
just
this
tax,
progressive income
what if they tax
is
the people over
massive
200,000?
tax hike. Yeah, they can, but there's only a handful of them.
There's only a handful of people.
Do you
in
realize
Illinois
that the
making
top,
Come on
the top zip code in Illinois is Kenilworth area, okay?
And
And
Wilmette,
do you want to know what the median income is there per household? AGI is 150,000.
Okay.
So you have people that are probably very wealthy from family wealth
Say
that
you
live
get a
there.
3%
And-
more,
and
that's
handful
another
of-
$5,000 on those folks. That's a big deal. 5,000 from each of those in Kenilworth. There are plenty of other people making more than 150,000. Look, you get two people, you get a teacher and a fireman in Chicago, they're probably making 150,000. Oh, there are lots of people making 150. You gotta be wrong.
But there's a
So
lot of
just
people
go
not
after
doing
them.
that.
Just-
There's a lot of people not
Have you
not
done the
doing that.
math? Why don't you say to Rauner, go to your Department of Revenue, tell us if there's a 3% additional tax just on the people making 150,000. Let's talk gross for a moment, okay? How much revenue do you get? I'd like the answer to that question. Why don't you ask Jeannie to do it? Any of these people? Let's start talking facts. Let's start talking facts. And then we can have JB on, he can talk facts. We haven't mentioned Chris Kennedy, he can talk facts. We can have Daniel Bitz. We can have Jeannie on. Could you ask Jeannie to come on? Because she's your friend, right?
Mhm.
I haven't been able to get her on. Do you think you should?
You know, you said very flattering things about her.
Do you think she'll come on?
We can always ask.
I can suck up with the rest of the best of them. Jeannie, well, we did a show with her a few years ago, and I should start running this. It was before Rauner, actually, and I predicted, I said, Jeannie Ives, when she was on my show, I turned to her and said, you're going to be the first female governor. I might have been very prescient. Jeannie come on the show, and of course Chris Rauner come on the show. Those are the 5 major candidates for governor. So let's hash out this progressive tax issue.
Mhm.
You're saying there's not enough money there, they'll have to start taxing low-income people, is that what you're saying?
It's gonna be a massive tax hike on the middle class.
Is that your perception as a Republican state rep, that that's all the Democrats have to offer the people of Illinois? A progressive tax, that's a tax on the rich that will make it better for the middle-class people of Illinois. Is that your perception?
Here's a rhetorical
No, just answer
question.
that question. Is that your perception?
That's what they're
of
selling.
Pritzker, Kennedy, and Biss are selling?
That's what they're selling. But
Well,
you know
wait a
what, they're
second,
not
wait a second.
specific about it. And they're not specific about the reason, because so Dan Biss, he's a mathematician. I'm sure he's done the math. You know it doesn't work. That's why he doesn't talk about the details.
Well, yeah, I actually was at an event with Daniel, and I asked that question. He kind of danced away. I have to do a write-in because they wanted to screen it, but they did ask. And you think his answer when he said, what is the limit, what is the floor, what's the level at which your progressive tax will kick in and start raising taxes? And he was kind of fudging there, I would say, between 100,000 and 200,000. So Daniel, we'd like you to come on. I don't want to speak for you. Representative Skillicorn just made the allegation that he's dancing. You're not telling us. Dispute him.
Let's see the details.
Make a liar out of Alan Skillicorn. Come on the show, talk with Berkowitz and say, take that, Skillicorn. Here's what I'm telling you. I'm not dancing. He's not evading anything.
Jeff, who's the number 1 proponent of progressive income tax in Illinois? I would argue that it's Ralph Material.
Yeah.
You know, for center of tax.
He's been talking about it for a long time.
So his group has come out with specifics.
And what
It's
is
a
the
massive tax hike for the middle class.
Where does it start? What's the lowest level that the increase starts at?
I don't know where the lowest level is very close to the poverty level. And it's similar to
The lowest level at which the progressive tax would raise.
Which hike up above?
Would hike above the current level.
The exact number, but
You don't know, you don't know.
But
You don't.
in the top
You
end,
should find this out yourself before you come.
Well,
We're asking
it's out
everybody,
there, it's
Republicans, okay.
no, the top end is over 10%. I mean, it would give us an income tax like
We have to
California.
be fair, we have to.
People, is this California? Do we have the property wealth? Do
That's
we
your
have the
argument,
industry
is
of
that
California?
your
Or
argument,
the weather of
your
California?
argument hasn't worked in California, but some of the Democrats say, I think this has worked very well in Wisconsin, and they don't have outrageous rates, and Republicans cite Wisconsin as a well-run state, it's efficient, we're losing jobs to it. What's your answer to this? Because he says, his example, I've heard Daniel say this, we're fair, we're balanced. I've heard Daniel say, look, Republicans complain, they ain't complaining about Wisconsin, they have a progressive tax. What's wrong with that argument?
Well, it's also wrong with everybody paying their fair share. What's wrong with flat?
No, answer Biss, answer Biss.
Mhm.
Biss said, what's wrong with Wisconsin? They have a progressive tax. Now, what's the problem there? Because you love Wisconsin, you say things are good in Wisconsin, so if Wisconsin can have a progressive tax, why can't Illinois?
For the record, I spent in Wisconsin and the Green Bay Packers. But
They-
what is different about Wisconsin? There's no debt. You know, we're buried by debt.
So if we have less debt, then you.
And Wisconsin is also a high tax state.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left.
Wisconsin is also a high tax state. I will not push them as
Okay,
a.
so you're
as
not,
a-
so
yeah.
so Scott Walker's not quite the hero you want to say, and they had a Republican legislature, a Republican majority legislature that had Scott
But if
Walker.
you look at the numbers,
And
it's still-
still, taxes aren't low enough for you?
No way.
You don't like Walker? You blame that on Walker or on the Republican majority legislature in Wisconsin? Who do you blame? Can't blame the
I don't
Democrats?
know if
for that?
I'm not gonna point too many fingers. I support some Walker's reforms.
See, we stump everybody
You
here.
didn't stop me. I'll kind of leave it. They're a high tax state. They're a little bit
But
more.
why
known.
are they? Is it Walker? Walker's not quite the guy Republicans say he is. If it's a high-tax state, he's been there as governor, and the Republicans have the majority.
Well, he's no libertarian.
Oh, you don't like Walker so much. Okay, so
No, I would not say that. I've met the man. I think he's done some good things.
he's no libertarian. We got you on the record for that. Let's go to Chris Kennedy. We got to be fair. We only have a few minutes left. We've covered Pritzker. We've covered this. Chris Kennedy. Look, you too young to really remember this, but you must have seen
I know.
clips. You must have seen clips of Robert F. Kennedy. You saw people reaching for him in 1968 before he was assassinated. They loved him. They just wanted to touch him. Seriously, he had so much charisma. And his uncle, Chris Kennedy's uncle, JFK. Look, if you've ever seen JFK in the clips, the man had style and he was smart.
I'm a fan of
He
the
was
Kennedy
articulate.
charisma.
Okay, so you gotta love Chris Kennedy, and they came around and they supported black civil rights, well, the civil rights movement in the 60s, which was black and white. You gotta love him. And now Chris Kennedy said, look, Rahm is, in his policies are pushing blacks out of Chicago. It's a racist policy. And just because he's a Democrat, that's not okay. We gotta do something about it. He's tying Pritzker, he's tying Rahm around Pritzker. He might even try to tie Rahm around this. This is Kennedy's argument. He's saying, if you're black, you gotta like me because I don't want to push you out of Chicago. You think I got that right?
But first,
Did I get that right?
you're close.
Okay.
Chris Kennedy, the charisma skipped that generation. Completely.
He's still pretty good.
I would beg to differ. And second, he's just as guilty as the same property tax gains as J.B. Pritzker with getting special exemptions and sticking it to the
He's
record.
going after Berkowitz.
Yeah, he's going after them.
Madigan.
But
he said Madigan
5 years
has a
ago,
conflict.
he was just as guilty of retaining the same law
This is
firms.
small crap. Raumer does some of that too.
Yeah, Raumer's just as guilty
Come
too.
on, talk. Give Chris
But
Kennedy.
brass tacks.
Chris Kennedy has
Chris
gone after
Kennedy-
Berkowitz. Has he gone after Berkowitz?
Yes,
Has he gone after Mike Madigan?
Chris Kennedy is desperate.
No, has he gone after Mike Madigan?
Yes, but 5 years ago, he worked with those same cronies.
What is he do? Look, what have you done for? You got to give him credit. He's gone after Berkowitz. He's gone after Mike Madigan. He's the one guy in the Democratic Party who says, "I'm going to lead, and if there are Democrats doing things wrong, I'm going to go after them."
Well,
Chris, you come on the show.
Vince used to vote for, Speaker Madigan for Speaker every year, but now he's against him too. But so here, where the thing is Chris Kennedy is desperate. He's getting blown out. He was the early leader. He was the early favorite.
Tactics.
he's
Let's
getting
talk policy.
desperate.
No, he's
The
desperate.
policy
Well, you
education-
dispute that? Are we pushing blacks out of? Are we pushing blacks out of
Who's moving out of
Chicago?
the city?
Well, blacks are because the schools are getting
Schools are horrible.
closed, and they're horrible. They're closing them so they can't even go to their close by schools. They get a girl stands up and goes to a slumber party. She stands up and she gets cut down in the crossfire. That happened 2 years ago. Nobody's done anything about it since. Look, and the state's attorney just read in the paper just a few days ago. We're taping this on January 12th. I guess it's January 11th or January 10th. 6 guys do a gangbang of a 15-year-old black girl. And what does the state's attorney's office do? They cop a plea deal where 2 of these guys do time served 4 months. So there's all this stuff about the Democrats taking the lead on sexual harassment. Well, Honor, you should be talking about, is that an appropriate penalty for a gangbang? 4 months? Well, is it?
Absolutely not.
Why aren't you talking about it?
We should be talking about
Instead, you're talking about legalizing marijuana. That's more important than stopping gangbangs of 15-year-old
No, it's
girls,
not.
black or white?
it. No, it's not.
So you should be talking about that.
We should talk about the ineffectiveness of our state's attorney. Fox isn't the only one that's being ineffective.
Okay, we're going to continue to talk as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, State Representative Alan Skillicorn from Dundee,
East Dundee.
East Dundee. He has now come out for legalizing marijuana. You got 5 seconds to make your pitch.
I'm a conservative Republican, but I'm also a libertarian. And this isn't about tax revenue. This is about doing what's right. It's a disservice that we're spending $30 to $40 million locking people up, incriminating them. The social ills of locking people up are worse than the social ills of a few guys smoking pot.
So he's picking up the sayings of the 60s, I remember, and make love, not war. You agree with that one too?
I'll pass.
Okay, but here's one. You come back next week and